Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well. As always, we have a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's get into today's AEW news stories. And let's talk about the ratings for the final Friday Night Dynamite episode on TNT. And AEW officials and fans will be happy to hear that the viewership and key demo rating rose last week for the final Friday Night Dynamite episode on TNT. Now, Friday's new edition of AEW Dynamite reportedly drew 552,000 live viewers on TNT. This is according to Nielsen via PW Torch. Now, this number is up 13.4% from last week's Friday Night Dynamite episode, which drew 487,000 live viewers on TNT. Now, the Dynamite show on Friday drew a 0.20 rating in the key 18 to 49 demographic. This is also up 5.3% from the previous week, which was even. The week before that was the lowest key demo rating in the show's history. Now, of course, last Friday's Dynamite featured the debut of Arn Anderson's sons Brock Anderson, Jim Ross's sit-down interview with Andrade El Idolo, Jake Hager defeating Wardlow in a MMA cage match, Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky defeating Darby Allin in a handicap match, plus a six-man tag team main event with the AEW World Tag Team Champion Matt Jackson and Impact Wrestling's The Good Brothers defeating Frankie Kazarian, Eddie Kingston, and Penta El Zero Miedo, among other matches and segments on that show. Now, Friday's Dynamite show drew the best audience for AEW in this temporary Friday night 10 p.m. time slot. This was the final Friday night episode for the time being. The show was up 13.4% from the previous week in viewership and up 5.3% from the previous week in the key 18 to 49 demographic. But, of course, Friday Night Dynamite's viewership was down 28.5% from the same week in 2020, which went head-to-head with WWE NXT in the Wednesday night time slot from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. The key demo was down 28.6% from the same week last year as well. So, look, AEW will obviously be happy with that number. AEW will be happy to see that the numbers got up. AEW will be happy to see the ratings got up. Obviously, they will be happy with that. But let's not be overly celebrating here. The number still isn't great, and AEW will be more than thankful they are moving out of that Friday night time slot. They will be beyond ecstatic that they're moving out of that dreaded Friday night time slot at that 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. time slot, because it's been terrible for AEW, and I think it's interesting how people are reporting this. And I don't like to go in on certain websites or journalists or anything like that, so I'm not going to do that here. But certainly there does feel a degree of mixed messages, shall we say, in this one, because again, a lot of people, I've seen quite a few people on social media being like, yes, the numbers are back up for Dynamite. What crisis? No crisis. First of all, there never was a crisis by any stretch of the imagination. I think anyone that was trying to put AEW down and say, look how terrible their ratings are. Look, nobody's watching the show. Dynamite in the mud. They're in the red as well. They're in debt and nobody's watching. They won't be around in 18 months. They've got agendas, unfortunately. They have agendas. They don't like AEW. For whatever reason, Lord knows I don't know, but for whatever reason, they have this really weird undying loyalty to WWE, which I will never understand. And I'm not a mark for either company, but I just certainly don't get that. AEW have not been in a crisis. They're not in the mud. Yes, they're in the red slightly because of their video game investment, but they will be profitable by the end of the year. And to be profitable in your second or third year of operating in any form of business, let alone pro wrestling, is a phenomenal achievement. Everyone should be congratulated for that in AEW. In terms of the ratings, I think AEW, and I think if you probably, press Tony Khan to be honest here and have an answer, he would be disappointed with these numbers. Of course he would be, and of course he would be alarmed by it. But he would also be realistic. They do have the excuse, and it is obviously a very, very valid excuse of, look, they're not where people expect to find them. They're not in that Wednesday night time slot. They're not on, they're not even on the right day, but they're also not in the right time slot as well. They're usually on Wednesday nights. They were moved to Friday because of the NBA playoffs. In addition to that, they're not even on Friday 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. They're on Friday 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Now, obviously, if they went head-to-head with SmackDown on that Friday night time slot of 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., they would probably get crushed. And again, then it would draw the comparisons of AEW. They're too big for their britches. They think they're this big company, and they're going up against SmackDown. They're going up against a real show. They're going up against the main roster. See, they're nothing. See. And it's not even worth the argument. It's not even worth the debate. Lord knows it was tough enough during the Wednesday night wars between AEW Dynamite and NXT, so we really don't need that between Dynamite and SmackDown or anything like that. We don't need to discuss how SmackDown's on network television, and that's its usual time slot of 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it's got all of this equity and being on the television for all of these years, and stars like Roman Reigns and all that kind of stuff. We certainly don't need to discuss any of that. So I certainly am not advocating for Dynamite to go head to head with SmackDown on that Friday night time slot. I just think some of the discussion points talking about AEW's bad ratings on Friday nights have been slightly unfair. It is what it is. Fridays are a terrible night to be on television for pro wrestling. Even I mentioned this before, and I know people will say, well, you're repeating yourself here, but it's worth mentioning. When SmackDown initially, for the first time, was moved to Fridays back in 2005 by whatever network they won, were they still on UPN at the time? When they were still on, when they were moved to Fridays, WWE, they pushed back massively against that. They really didn't want to be on Fridays. They hated being on Fridays. They were approached by the network. The network said, look, SmackDown does good ratings for us. We want good ratings on Fridays. And WWE said, no, we're not moving. And they said, yes, you are. Otherwise, you're not going to be on the network. And eventually, they paid WWE a lot of money and they moved to Fridays. But WWE, even back then, when television ratings were high and viewership was high, even back then, they didn't want to move to Friday because they knew Friday's a tough night. It's the end of the working week. People have plans. They're going to be going out. They're going to be going to the theater, the cinema, to bars, pubs, restaurants, you name it. They've got plans. And people just aren't interested in sitting in front of their television from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., prime time hours. They're not interested in watching television on a Friday night. A lot of people aren't. Some people are. There are quite a few people are, but certainly there's a big chunk of people that aren't. Having a time slot in the middle of the week where most people are going to be in, more people are going to be in than, say, a Friday, that's more beneficial, and it's been proven for AEW. Plus, again, the later time slot, not only do people have plans, but also, if they do have plans, they're fully in full swing by 10 p.m. And you've got SmackDown from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So you might have your wrestling fix by that point, and you go, look, even if I watched a bad SmackDown show, I've watched WWE, I don't want to watch another 2 hours of pro wrestling. I don't want to watch 4 hours of pro wrestling back to back to back to back to back. You or I might want to because we're pro wrestling fans and we can't get enough. But certainly the casual fan, they might be like, okay, it's enough. I'm just not interested. And I think the interesting thing about it and this whole Friday night experiment, and we'll touch on this when it comes to Rampage and all that kind of stuff in a second, but I think an interesting part of all of this is, again, it's basically confirmed that the AEW audience and the WWE audience are completely separate, right? The stat that Dave Meltzer released, I think, is one of the most telling things we've learned out of all of this, is that 13% of people that watched 1 minute of SmackDown on Fox watched 1 minute of Dynamite on TNT. Basically, 13% of SmackDown's audience goes over to watch Dynamite afterwards. That's not a lot. That really isn't a lot. And it says volumes. It speaks absolute volumes to this discussion of when we were talking about it when it came to the Wednesday Night Wars with NXT and AEW, that they were fighting for the same audience and they're trying to jostle and grapple for the same audience. They weren't. I don't think they ever really were. I really don't. Yes, obviously, there's a proportion, about 13%, that will go back and forth. But in reality, they've got different audiences at this point. People like AEW and they don't like WWE. People like WWE and they don't like AEW. It didn't take that, it's not that much of a genius to figure it out. Go on social media because there's certainly a big proportion of people that don't like AEW and they're big WWE fans. They don't like AEW for the style, for the referees, for the psychology, for Tony Khan, for whatever. There's plenty of reasons. And in the same vein, there's people that like AEW and they don't like WWE. They're tired of the bad creative. They're tired of the 50-50 booking. They're tired of that old, outdated psychology and philosophy. They think AEW is modern day pro wrestling. They think that's what it's evolved to. And the audiences are completely different at this point, or certainly largely different. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's maybe a real big key takeaway from all of this, is that the audiences are different. And I think when it comes to Rampage, and we'll talk about Rampage in a second, I think it has opened the eyes of some in AEW. I truly do, of saying, okay, maybe we shouldn't have super, super high expectations for the numbers we're going to do on Friday nights for Rampage. Because I think when people said, they're going to be launching their second show, it's the third hour on TNT. It's the third hour that TNT wanted for Dynamite, but Tony Khan said no, they split it into a separate show, which is the right call. A lot of people thought, okay, well, AEW Dynamite, they might be doing close to 1 million viewers on Wednesday nights. Maybe they're going to be doing close to 1 million on Friday nights, or they're going to have good numbers or good ratings. In reality, Rampage, apart from maybe its debut, maybe its first couple of weeks, realistically is probably going to be looking at these numbers that Dynamite's been getting on Friday nights. the sort of 500,000, 400,000, 600,000. I think that's the number that they've got to be looking at. They should be using this as a base level of, okay, we had our flagship show. We had our premiere show with all of the talent. Yes, some weeks it was taped. Yes, some weeks it was live. But that's what's going to happen with Rampage. It's going to be no different there. I think AEW have to look at this and say, these are our expectations. We're going to be following SmackDown. That isn't a lead-in because the audiences are different, and we should expect 500, 600, 400,000 viewers. And we should be content with that. Because if we're expecting to be doing the same numbers that we're doing on Wednesday nights, that's just not going to happen. That just isn't going to happen. So I think all of this is, obviously, it's been incredibly frustrating and difficult for AEW. And yes, the numbers haven't been great. And yes, that does obviously frustrate them. But I think, as long as they can get the viewers back, I think they'll look at it as a very eye-opening experience. A very eye-opening experience. I think it will make them realize that the move to TBS next year absolutely is the right call as well, because you can't be doing these month of preemptions every single year. You just can't, because eventually the audience might not come back. And that is the concern. That's why they're loading up those July shows. They're loading up those July shows, one, because they need to sell tickets, but also, two, they've realized, look, for the last 4 weeks or so, we've been getting 400, 500,000 viewers on TNT. Yes, it's on a Friday night. Yes, it's in a unfavorable time slot, but usually we're getting close to 1 million. Now we're getting to about 500,000. There is no, you can assume that they're going to come back, but there's no guarantee that they will. They probably will. 99% chance they will. But who knows? Maybe the fans that haven't been watching AEW the last few weeks might go, you know what? I haven't missed it. I can't be bothered to go back. It's difficult to get people back once you've lost them. That's my point. So it's going to be interesting. And that's why they're loading up these shows. That's why they're doing all of these things, because they realize, again, there's no guarantee they'll come back. They probably will, and I think they will, but there's no guarantee. So it opens up the eyes when it comes to the TBS move. It opens up the eyes when it comes to Rampage. And I think it just opens up the eyes just for a lot of things in general. So certainly very interesting about the ratings on the preempted Friday night shows. Now, speaking of AEW Rampage, we have a location for the first AEW Rampage show, because AEW has announced a Pittsburgh homecoming for Women's World Champion Britt Baker. AEW will return to the Peterson Event Center in Pittsburgh for 2 nights in early August. A live Dynamite taping will be held on Wednesday, August 11, while a live Rampage taping will be held on Friday, August 13. This will be the Rampage premiere on TNT. Now, tickets go on sale Friday, June 25th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So this was announced yesterday by AEW and Britt Baker. So as you can see there, they're going to be doing almost a very small residency in Pittsburgh for these two shows. Now, it's funny because the last Pittsburgh homecoming they did, it was like maybe the 3rd or 4th edition of Dynamite, or something like that. It was really early into the run of Dynamite. This is when Britt Baker was still the dentist that was a smiler, high five centerpiece of the women's division in AEW and didn't work out. Even back then, the crowd was super, super into her because it was her hometown. She came out, she was with the Pittsburgh Steelers mascot and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if they'll do the same thing. It's an indicator, of course, that she's probably going to be the Women's World Champion by then. So any title defenses that she has between now and then, they've probably given that away. I know that it looks like Nyla Rose is going to be the next challenger for Britt Baker. As to when she'll actually challenge for that title, maybe it'll be on that August 11 edition of Dynamite. I don't know if AEW would have the balls, frankly, to main event their first edition of Rampage with an AEW Women's World Championship match. Not that it wouldn't draw, but AEW hasn't even, they've done one women's main event with Dynamite, and that was only this year, and that was Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa in that Lights Out match. I don't know, just again, looking at AEW's booking philosophy of women's wrestling, if they would really trust them to put them in that call. They should. They absolutely should, but I don't know if they will. I think it's interesting that Rampage is going to be in Pittsburgh. I think that's smart. I think it's it's a northeastern crowd. It'll be a red hot crowd. To be honest, the AEW crowd, all Elite Wrestling crowds, wherever they've been, are always red hot. And it's just crazy, isn't it, seeing that AEW announcing that these venues and announcing these locations for their touring and announcing their locations for the tapings, for Dynamite, for Rampage, whatever. They have done more shows at this point. This is how mad it is, isn't it? And when you think about the pandemic and the amount of time that's passed and all that kind of stuff, they have done more shows in this pandemic era than they did outside of the pandemic era. Because remember, Dynamite launched on TNT in October of 2019. So they had, 3 months in 2019, 3 months in 2020, so 6 months. And since then, it's all been empty arena shows, whether it's at the Nightmare Factory or whether it's been at Daly's Place. It's over 12 months, well over 12 months. It's something like 14, 15, 16 months of pure pandemic shows. AEW has operated largely during the pandemic. They've done far more shows during the pandemic than they did prior to it. So it's almost going to seem a bit weird. I mean, just in general, it's going to be a bit weird going back on the road for everything of pro wrestling and having fans back. Lord knows I can't wait. But AEW comes out of the pandemic just almost a completely different company. The company and the roster that they had going into the pandemic is almost just completely different. There are so many different people on that roster right now that haven't performed regularly in front of fans for AEW. It's such a massive shame about someone like Brody Lee that he never did. But you've got new people like Eddie Kingston made his debut for AEW in front of no fans. I know he's been teamed with Moxley recently and they have had some fans, but in terms of a regular touring, city to city, different venues, state to state, Eddie Kingston hasn't done that for AEW. This version of Britt Baker really hasn't been in front of all of those different fans. I know, again, she turned heel around Jericho Cruise at the start of 2020, so there was a little bit of time, but really this more polished version of Britt Baker hasn't gone from city to city to city to city. So many people haven't, Miro, and the list can go on and on and on. So I think it's coming out of the pandemic. Again, AEW just almost looks completely different, which is so fascinating because, despite the shortcomings of the pandemic, AEW really has, you could argue, thrived during the pandemic. And it's going to be a really big 5-6 months for AEW as we go to the end of the year now, because they were starting to make quite a bit of momentum prior to the pandemic. Obviously, they had arguably their best ever pay-per-view in Revolution right before the pandemic, and they're getting the crowds red hot, and they were doing, large numbers or larger numbers in arena, and everything just stopped. But you could argue that they've got all of this momentum coming out of the pandemic, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that translates. Again, now coming out of the pandemic, you're on Wednesday nights unopposed. So even with, a limited amount of fans, you were doing on a couple of occasions, 1 million viewers every single week with fans in attendance. You're going to be hoping now, can we get over 1 million viewers every week? We've got no competition. Again, Rampage, that's going to be the interesting point now. I think that's going to be a really big point of discussion over the course of the next few months, especially because, again, I don't think the ratings are going to be that great if we look at Dynamite's experiment on Friday nights. So all of it, AEW is a really fascinating company right now. And obviously, again, they've got the big New York debut with the Arthur Ashe Stadium show, and I think that's going to be a massive deal for AEW too. So there's so much excitement. Again, the next 6 months are really going to be real big indicators of how far AEW truly can go when it comes to their live events, when it comes to their ratings, all of it. It's a really exciting time. So it's just fascinating. It's such a fascinating landscape right now for AEW. Now, switching gears, Jon Moxley, obviously former AEW World Champion, but also the IWGP United States Heavyweights Champion, Jon Moxley, has been announced for New Japan Pro Wrestling's first United States show with fans in attendance for well over a year. Now, obviously, due to the global pandemic, it's been over a year since New Japan Pro Wrestling has held an event in the United States with live fans. Well, that's going to change on August 14, when New Japan Pro Wrestling Resurgence takes place in Los Angeles, California. And do you know who top AEW star and current IWGP United States Champion Jon Moxley? Yes, he is advertised for the show. Now, what's interesting here, and you can see all of the wrestlers that are advertised on there, I think it's interesting that Lio Rush is part of that advertisement when it's probably unlikely he's going to be at that event unless his shoulder injury heals up between now and then. I don't know. He did have surgery, I think. But you've also got stars like Finn Juice, Jay White, Fred Dozer, etc., all listed for that show. So that's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, we haven't seen Jon Moxley in a couple of weeks. He's been, I would assume, on paternity leave, given that his wife, Renee Paquette, has given birth to their first child, a baby girl. Now, Moxley did the whole, guest hosted the Oral Sessions podcast last week after it was announced that Renee had given birth. We don't know how long Moxley is going to be away for, given that, it's towards the end of June now. You've got July. This is sort of mid-August. This is being announced for. So I would assume maybe he would be back by then in AEW too. I think AEW would be hoping, again, and I don't know this for a fact, this is just more speculation on my part, but I think AEW would probably be hoping, given that they are returning to touring in July, they would maybe hope to have Jon Moxley back then. I mean, it would be a good way, certainly for it to to end one of those shows of not having Moxley around for a while and then having Moxley show up. You can kind of almost recreate his debut at Double or Nothing in 2019. That could be fun. Get a good reaction from the crowd and all that kind of thing. So interesting. I hope to see more of Moxley doing back and forth. I think initially that's what he wanted to do. Again, because of the pandemic, he hasn't been able to do a lot of both AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling stuff. Again, when he left WWE, I think his intention wasn't really to go to AEW. It was more to do stuff in Japan and do the deal that he had initially, where he would go over there, do a couple of title defenses, come back, help them launch the brand in the United States. And he is still factored in for New Japan. Obviously, they're very keen on having him. If they weren't, they would have had him drop the United States Championship to Kenta or someone like that when they did it. So obviously, they know how important Jon Moxley is. And given that we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to the pandemic, I guess they're hoping they can have more of Moxley on the New Japan Strong shows and certainly for pay-per-views and stuff like that going forward as well. So very interesting as when it comes to New Japan. MJF has launched a scathing criticism of Rosie O'Donnell. Yes, he didn't hold back when talking about legendary TV host Rosie O'Donnell and how her and her team declined the offer to interview him. Now, if you're not aware, MJF appeared on the Rosie O'Donnell show as a kid, where he sang "You Are My Sunshine" by Jimmy Davis and Charles Mitchell. The AEW star also spoke about his career aspirations on the show, saying he wanted to become either a pro wrestler or an opera singer. I mean, talk about different sides. I mean, I guess they're both performers, right? However, as per MJF, Rosie O'Donnell declined to interview him recently when he and his team reached out to her. Appearing on Game Mark's podcast, the leader of the Pinnacle stated he wanted to help the host as she has been away from the limelight for a while. While he's on the top of the world, he thought he would do her a favor and help her out. The AEW star explained that the reason O'Donnell declined his offer could be because she owes him money from the first time he appeared on her show. The, I guess, future AEW World Champion revealed he was sickened by the fact she stole from a 5-year-old kid. This is very much in character. But this is what he had to say, quote, "Rosie is a dumb, fat B." Again, keep that in. Don't edit out. "We tried to reach out to her several times. I would be giving her the rub, by the way, not the other way around. She desperately needs the limelight right now. I'm on top of the world. We thought it'd be interesting if we could have another interview while I'm on top of the world. To my knowledge, her people declined, probably out of fear for me showing the world that she still owes me money from the last time I did an interview of her. I was never compensated. She stole money from a 5-year-old. Who does that? Sickening. I got Shrek ears and a $25 coupon to Dunkin' Donuts," he said. So I think AEW, legitimately, I know Rosie O'Donnell, might not be the celebrity that she once was, but Rosie O'Donnell still, I guess, is still a name. People know who Rosie O'Donnell is. I truly, truly would love, and again, I don't know if AEW can really pull it off. I would love to see them do it, and I would love to see them try doing it. Whether they can or can't, time will only tell, but I would love for them to do a recreation of that. I would love for them to do another sit-down interview, Rosie O'Donnell with MJF, but the older version of MJF. And knowing AEW likes to pay stuff off like that, I would be surprised if they hadn't. I really would be surprised if they hadn't. And who knows, it could happen in the future. I would love for it to happen. I really, really would. Back in the day, if this was the Attitude Era, they'd have Rosie O'Donnell and MJF in the middle of the ring, and Rosie O'Donnell would do an interview, then MJF would lock in the Salt of the Earth armbar. I don't know, something like that. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would love to see them pay it off. Now, finally, we'll talk about Lio Rush, because obviously Lio Rush announced his retirement recently. He recently announced his surprising retirement from pro wrestling following his AEW debut at Double or Nothing. The former WWE superstar cited an injury as the reason behind his decision in a lengthy statement. Now, Matt Hardy, who of course was in the same match that Lio Rush was in, the Casino Battle Royale at Double or Nothing, believes that Lio Rush will eventually return to the squared circle. During a recent interview with Signed by Superstars, Hardy recalled working with Rush at the AEW Double or Nothing Casino Battle Royale. Big Money Matt revealed he saw Rush wearing a sling backstage after the match, confirming the former Cruiserweight Champion's legitimate post-show injury. He said, quote, "We had a match. He was in there for a few minutes till the end with myself and Private Party, and he got dumped out. And then I thought everything was fine. I saw him later. He's got a sling on or whatever. I guess he did legitimately get hurt with that. But he did say," this is what Matt Hardy said, "he does think that Lio Rush will return in the future." He said, quote, "I know he said he was retiring. So many people were mad at me. It was my fault that I eliminated him. I didn't have anything to do with it. But it's just crazy. I've been wrestling longer than he's been alive. He can't retire. He's not going to retire. He'll be back. Lio will be back." So I agree with Matt Hardy. I do think Lio Rush will eventually return. He's so young, and just it's pro wrestling. Everyone eventually comes back. Eventually, money talks, and I guess after being out of the ring for maybe a couple of years, and he suddenly feels healthy, he'll come back. He will come back. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of these AEW news stories today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about AEW, Impact Wrestling, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.